What's up, everyone? My name is John. Happy New Year. Today I'm going to be talking about some of my favorite books that I read in 2017, which also happened to be written in 2017. I figured that this would help maybe somebody who's looking for a book for their 2018 reading list. So here we go. The first book on my list that I also happened to read, one of the first books that I read last year, was All Our Wrong Todays by Elon Mastai, I believe. This is a fiction book about a guy who lives in an utopian 2016. Basically what we thought 2016 would be, with flying cars and moving sidewalks and all that good stuff thanks to technology and this energy machine. He ends up one way or another in our 2016 that we know and sometimes love. It's all about him figuring out first how to get back to his utopian perfect 2016 society, what he did to screw this whole thing up, how he's going to fix it. So it clearly has to do with time travel, some alternate universe stuff, but it's not too heavy sci-fi, so don't get too freaked out about that. I actually thought it was really funny. He breaks the fourth wall a lot, so he kind of goes to his audience or the reader to describe what's happening, and it ends up pretty funny. So I would definitely recommend All Our Wrong Todays if you're looking for a light, fun read for sure. The next one on my list for favorites of 2017 is Vacation Land by John Hodgman. You know John Hodgman from The Daily Show. He also happens to be an author of, before fake news ended up being trendy, he actually wrote these fake news books with these fun fake facts. Vacation Land is his first almost earnest memoir. He talks about stories growing up or living in Maine. He's very self-depreciating. He realizes that, for example, one of his stories is buying a canoe from an auction, and he talks about the problems of doing that, but then he also realizes how ridiculous it is that he's complaining about buying a canoe in the process where there's plenty of other problems that other people have that he doesn't have to deal with. So it's a little bit of like white privilege, but with a touch of earnest sincerity, if that makes sense. But it's very funny, and if you like John Hodgman, you'll definitely like Vacation Land. The next book on my list, speaking of Maine actually, the state of Maine, is The Stranger in the Woods, The Extraordinary Story of the Last True Hermit by Michael Finkel. This guy goes into the Maine woods when he's 20 years old, abandons all his possessions, everything he has, and lives as a hermit for 30 years or so. He almost turned into this urban legend, like a Bigfoot, and nobody believed that this one guy was doing this for 30 years. For example, the Maine woods are crazy cold in the wintertime. All the locals were like, there's no way that this guy is surviving on his own. They didn't believe that it happened, but everything based on all the facts, his own account, the reporter's account who wrote the book, and everybody, the story all added up. It's an incredible true story, and if you are thinking about going on a camping trip for a few days, or just want to get away from people and society for a while, I think you can definitely relate to this book. So check out The Stranger in the Woods. I would definitely recommend it. The next book on my list, I kind of cheated because I finished it up in the first couple of days of 2018. That's White Tears by Hari Kunzru. I'm picking really tough authors, guys. I'm sorry if I'm butchering all these names. So White Tears is about these two friends, come from very different backgrounds, and they bond over their love of everything music. They're audiophiles, they're big record collectors. They basically experience a tragedy very early on in the book, and the whole story turns into this mystery turned supernatural thriller type of story. It turns into a very fun, fast-paced read, and if you're a collector of anything, if you're a fan of music, or are a little bit eccentric in any ways, I think you can definitely relate to the characters in this book. So yeah, I really liked White Tears for sure. The second to last book on my list is We Were 8 Years in Power, An American Tragedy by Ta-Nehisi Coates. This is the same author who wrote Between the World and Me, a very popular book a couple years back. Beautiful Struggle as well. This one is not his typical memoir. It's actually from his years at The Atlantic and as a writer, and it's based each year in the Obama administration. He has a corresponding essay to go along with it. What I thought was really cool is that, beyond just the powerful, really heavy material in these essays, before each essay, he has new material basically where he sets each of them up. The case for reparations, for example, one of his essays He talks about why he chose to write it at the time and how it connects to the Obama administration and how things were going at the time. So if you did not read them at the time and you're reading them now in 2017, that context is really interesting from the author. Now, fair warning that this book is definitely like his other works that are not the most uplifting and positive and, don't necessarily make you feel good right after you read them, but they're very necessary and important reads, and you could basically pick this book up at any time and reread it over and over again and find some new tidbits. A lot of value in this book, a lot of good information, and really enjoyable to read. Not necessarily fun, but enjoyable. The last book on my list, probably my favorite book of this past year, and looking at a lot of year-end wrap-ups and best of 2017 lists and all that, I think a lot of people agreed with that. It is Lincoln in the Bardo by George Saunders. Now, Saunders is typically a short story writer, extremely talented. I can't recommend any of his other books enough. I think I've read 3 of them so far, and they're really awesome. But this is his first actual novel. It tells the story of Abraham Lincoln, whose son tragically passes away, which was a true story. And Saunders built on that, basically envisioning how Abraham Lincoln visited his son's grave, and the story takes place all throughout one night. And he manages to make that extremely interesting and entertaining. There's basically this huge cast of characters that each have their unique voices and contribute to this story. I actually really want to check out the audiobook because each of those characters are voiced by different people. I've heard that it's really good as well, but this is probably the most unique book that I've read this year and the most entertaining. So I can't recommend Lincoln in the Bardo enough, and I really would like to hear if anybody else has read it and what they thought. And with that, I think that wraps up all of my favorites that I've read in 2017. I'm mulling over a couple other ideas for videos, top audiobooks of 2017 or books that I happened to read last year that weren't necessarily published last year. So be on the lookout for those, but I appreciate you guys watching this, and let me know if you've read any of these books before or you're going to check them out because I mentioned them. I would love to hear from you guys and we can talk about them a little bit more. So thanks for watching. I'll see you soon.